What is the Son but an extension of the Father? Frank Herbert, Dune. Book 2, Muad'dib. Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last chapter, Paul and Jessica had gotten into one of Duncan Idaho's old hiding places, and they were supposed to wait there for him. And they set up a tent and all that. And then Paul had a few revelations. His mind started to expand because of all the exposure to the spice melange. Not only that, he came to a revelation. It was revealed that he realized that he was a Harkonnen, and that his grandfather was the Baron Harkonnen, and that his mother was a Harkonnen. And so that was the realization. And so now this chapter, the next chapter, picks up immediately after the events of the last one. They're still inside the still tent, and they're now hiding away. There's a storm going on outside the rocks, so they can't really do anything. And this tent is starting to get buried, and now Paul is starting to process what he just realized in the last chapter, that he is a Harkonnen. And then his mother is worrying that he might have some kind of deep-seated resentment against her, because that's where his Harkonnen side comes from, is her. So the other thing is, we are now entering book 2 of Dune Muad'dib, because the book is split up into 3 books. And so now we're into book 2. So what's interesting is we're into book 2, and feyd-rautha hasn't shown up again. We just saw him in the one chapter early on, where the Baron Harkonnen was discussing his plans with his mentat, and Feyd just happened to be there, and he wanted Feyd to listen in. We never seen him again in the book, and I'm not sure exactly when he pops up again. The reason why I'm talking about this is because of what we're going to see in the new Denis Villeneuve film. If Feyd's going to be in part 1, I don't think he is. So I think they're just going to somehow rework that scene with the Baron, and you won't see feyd-rautha show up until probably part 2. And, well, he has to show up in part 2, or he's not going to be in it at all, I guess. But now I'm wondering if there's some kind of like hidden cameo or some kind of teaser cameo that he has in it, and who they're going to cast for that role. And as everyone knows, the Baron is kind of grooming him to be the savior of Arrakis. So now and that's all we've seen him, just that little bit of feyd-rautha in book 1. And now we're entering into book 2. And so now they're in the tent. There's a raging storm outside, and they're Harkonnen, and then Paul realizes he's a Harkonnen sunk in, and now he says to himself, and now Harkonnen will kill Harkonnen. Because he's bent on getting back at the Harkonnens for what they had just done for House Atreides. And so he decides right then and there, Harkonnen will kill Harkonnen. And earlier, Jessica was coming to this realization and wondering, does he resent me? Because that's where his Harkonnen side comes from. And then she realizes to herself and says to herself, well, it can't be me. I was given to the Bene Gesserit sisterhood at such a young age, and I have no memory of my mother or any of my lineage or anything like that. And so and I went with the Duke, and was engulfed in his values, and even to the point where she betrayed the Bene Gesserit sisterhood to bear Duke Leto's son. So it's almost like she's kind of examining herself to see, now that she's come to the realization that she is Harkonnen, could any of that seeded evilness and all that depravity that's in the Harkonnens, could any of it be in her? And that's why she's saying that to herself. That's how I kind of take the chapter anyway. And then the other thing in this chapter is we get to see some more of the strange Fremen equipment. You have the strange tent that's actually having sand fill up in this little basin they're in because there's a storm going on outside the surrounding rocks. And just to give an example of how strong the storm is, Paul can actually see one of the larger rocks getting cut down to size by the winds, the gusting winds and stuff. And so then Paul then takes a drink from his still suit, and in this one we get to see them actually drink some water out of it, and the water is described as warm, flat, tasteless water, and it's just basically enough to soothe his throat. So I mean, water is so limited. You gotta, even if the water is getting recycled through your body, it's not like you can just chug this stuff back or anything. It's just a few sips here or there, and just enough to keep you alive. And this also kind of triggers something in Jessica when it makes her aware of the slickness of the still suit against her skin, and seeing Paul take that sip of water, even though she wants to, she doesn't want to give in to the thirst right now, because now they're entering the territory of the desert. And before, they knew all the dangers. They knew the dangers were going to be the Harkonnens. The dangers were going to be the Emperor. But now that they're entering into this new territory of the desert, now they don't know what the dangers are going to be. What are the unknown dangers? That's going to crop up. What kind of things are out there that's going to get them? All these deadly storms, giant worms. And at this point in time, the Fremen themselves, because they don't know if the Fremen are going to be friendly to them or not. They have absolutely no idea. And then you have Paul, as they start to leave the tent after the storm settles, kind of describe some strange equipment. That one is almost like a tool, because the tent is buried in sand. So Paul uses almost like a static tool to push the sand apart so they can make like a path so they can get out and get out of this sand pit that they've been buried in, so they can make their way across the desert. And again, it's at nighttime again, and so they can only move at night because it's just too hot during the day. That's how it is on Arrakis. And the interesting thing is, the spot that they're in was one of Duncan Idaho's spots. And Duncan Idaho told them, this is how long I can hold out under Harkonnen torture before I give up your location. And so anyway, that's what he told Paul. So this is how much time you have that you can stay here. After this, you have to leave, or the Harkonnens will be coming. So they go out onto the desert floor, and then they can see some rocks off on the horizon, and it's kind of described as, almost like a jagged city, almost with all these weird jagged rocks sticking up, or almost like an old battleship with all the strange moon-shaped sails and the strange, all the strange angles of these rocks off in the distance. That's how it's described by Frank Herbert in the book. And they can see all these different colors of oranges and purples kind of blooming up into the sky, like this strange light show going off in the distance. And as they're looking at it, then they realize that it's the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are just scouring the desert, cutting everything up with las guns, and just killing anything that moves. So they want to make sure that Paul and Jessica are dead, because they don't know at this point. The Harkonnens don't know what happened to their bodies. Their bodies went missing, and the 2 guards were found dead. So they're trying to see if there's any survivors, and trying to track them down so they can destroy them. And so then Paul decides, well, we have to move south along the rocks as far as we can to evade capture from the Harkonnen Ornithopters. And at this point, Paul is now starting to take charge. He's starting to take on the role of his father. He's starting to take more leadership over his mother. Now his mother is starting to follow him, and she kind of realizes that at the end of the chapter, that, now she's starting to follow behind him. Now he's taking the point, and he's kind of falling into his father's shoes, who has recently just died. So interesting chapter. Now this chapter is like pretty short. So not a lot happens in this chapter, but more interesting, like psychological stuff of what the characters are thinking in their minds and stuff like that. And also now that we're into book 2. So we're getting pretty deep into the book now, and things are going to get more and more interesting from here on out. And before I go, one thing I wanted to talk about that I almost forgot about is Lady Jessica wondering who her mother is. She has no idea who her mother is. She realizes that, you know, the Baron Harkonnen is her father and he's Paul's grandfather. But she wonders then, okay, well, who's my mother? She has no idea. Now, I don't know who originally was supposed to be Jessica's mother, but if you have read the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books, then you know the answer to that question. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.